going on, everybody? Hope you guys have had a happy Christmas, and I hope you guys all have a happy New Year's as well. Before I do my best and worst of the end of the year list, I have a couple review roundups that I wanted to do of a few movies that I've checked out. In this video, there will be 5 movies that I've checked out recently, so stick around and let's talk about them. First up, we'll talk about a movie that came out this week that is Nosferatu, which was directed by Robert Eggers. He's done films like The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, and I've loved every single one of those films. So I was really hyped going into this film, but at the same time, I was kind of cautious because I'm not really a big fan of Dracula-style kind of movies and vampires. There's a few movies that are the exception of the rule, but with this one, I just wasn't sure how I was going to actually take this film. The film stars Lily Rose Depp, Willem Dafoe, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ralph Ineson, and many others as well. And with this film, I'll say this, from a tech aspect, I actually really did enjoy the tech aspects here. I think the sound is done really well. I do think the music is incorporated pretty well. The way that it's shot, the dreary atmosphere is absolutely nailed in here. It's a little bit too long for me, and I think I didn't really connect to the characters that much. Partially, I think that is because of Lily Rose Depp. I've never been a huge fan of her. I've seen her in another movie called Voyagers, which I absolutely hated that movie. And she was in another movie called Wolf a couple years ago. And I haven't really been impressed with her. This is the 3rd movie that I've seen her in. And her performance was okay to me. It wasn't really top-notch to me. I felt at times some of the things that were going on were kind of silly. Bill Skarsgård, he plays Nosferatu here. And I've never seen any of the other films, the silent film, or any of the other films that are even included with like Dracula and Bram Stoker's Dracula. I've never seen any of those before. But I wasn't really getting into this. I thought it was a little bit goofy that he had that mustache going on. There were some breathing points that he had that were kind of annoying. It kind of reminded me of that character on Hey Arnold, where he's sitting there making those weird breathing noises and he keeps getting punched and his glasses gets punched out. Yeah, those kind of breathing kind of motions, it kind of took me out of the movie. I felt like it was very disjointed. The story is kind of jumping around a lot, and I just felt like I couldn't really connect too much. I felt like there were times where there were some scary moments, and there were some scenes I was like, oh, they really nailed that portion of the film. I do want to praise Nicholas Hoult, though, for his performance, because I really did feel like his performance was there despite the fact that there wasn't really a lot to really work with. I think Willem Dafoe does a pretty decent job, despite the fact, again, that he doesn't have a lot to work with. There is a lot of dream sequences in here. You can take a shot every time that you actually see one. There's a lot of rats in here, and there's a lot of dialogue where they're like, oh, well, he's unwell because there's a black plague that is going on that is caused by Nosferatu. Now, for a score perspective, I would give it about a 2.5 out of 5, mainly because of the tech aspects. It's definitely my least favorite of Robert Eggers' films. I just wasn't that intrigued throughout this film. I felt it was just a little bit too long. I am really surprised by the rave reviews and people saying this is the scariest movie of 2024 because I just didn't really get that vibe. A couple jump scares, but other than that, I just really wasn't infatuated with this story. I just felt like it was too disjointed, jumping around, and it just didn't really pique my interest throughout the entirety of the film. Next up is a film called Babygirl that also came out this week. It was directed by Helena Rain, and she has done one other film I've seen before, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. The film stars Nicole Kidman, Harris Dickinson, and Antonio Banderas, and it's about a high-powered CEO played by Nicole Kidman, in which she has an intern played by Harris Dickinson, who wants to start a dom-sub relationship with her, and she's very reluctant by this. She has a problem having an orgasm from her husband, Antonio Banderas. And the film, it is a sexual film. I don't think it's really crazy like other films that I've seen that have a lot of sex in it, but there is sex, obviously, in this film. It's very mature in its themes. It's shot well, but I do think at times what really annoyed me in the camera work is a lot of times they would move the camera around, and I felt like at times it wasn't steady at points. I also felt like a lot of times the camera was out of focus, and I don't know if that was done on purpose. I think this director, I remember when I watched Bodies, 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 she kind of had the same problem as well, with just camera movements and the camera being out of focus at times. So I'm kind of not surprised that we got more of the same. I guess that's just a stylistic choice that this director actually has in this film. and obviously with bodies as well. But I think with Nicole Kidman here, I think her performance is pretty well done. I do think between the two characters, it's very awkward, but I think it's supposed to be like that because obviously she's a lot older. I believe she's in her 60s, and this guy is probably in his 20s. I'm not sure. They don't really actually say. So there is some awkward moments if you're not really into the 50 Shades of Grey type thing, but not really too crazy like a 50 Shades of Grey. It's a rated R movie, but at the same time, it does have its moments in which obviously it explores those sexual natures and desires, and there's porn involved as well. So there's things like that in the movie, and I feel like for some people it's going to be too much, while others, they may feel like it's fine for the subject matter. I do feel like the third act is really rushed. I feel like there are some characters that get on screen and you want a little bit more and you don't really get it. I did not like the ending whatsoever. I felt like certain things and dramatic things were happening, and then they just hurry up and end it and rush it to the ending, and I just wasn't really a fan of that. It is kind of goofy at times, kind of funny at times, but at the same time, it was a very intriguing story, and it kept me interested. I don't think it's a movie that I would watch more than once, but I think for a theater visit and the fact that I did check this out close to Christmas, I feel like it was a movie that intrigued me enough and I enjoyed enough of the story. And even though some of the acting at times feels kind of weird and awkward at points, and definitely some scenes that feel awkward, I enjoyed it for what it was. So I would give a score of this a 3 out of 5. If you do want to check this out, I would say probably check it out at home. It's not really something you need to rush to the theater to check out. But if you like Nicole Kidman, you probably will enjoy this movie. I did feel sorry for Antonio Banderas in a way because I felt like he just didn't get enough time to shine in this role. And just the fact that he goes from Puss in Boots to this role, it's kind of funny in a way. But I enjoyed his performance for what he had on screen. I just think that some of the other characters that are involved definitely needed a little bit more time to really grow the story a little bit more. And I do feel at times that people have said that this couple really didn't have that much chemistry. I kind of get that, but I think it's supposed to be awkward just despite the fact of the age difference. Next up is a film called Conclave. This was directed by Edward Berger, and I've seen one of his other films before. That is All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a Netflix film. This film stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow. Now, this is basically about a pope that has recently passed away, and they have to re-elect a new pope. Now, Ralph Fiennes, his performance here is pretty good. I can't say that I was really really interested in this movie. It came to Peacock and I was like, okay, I'll check it out for what it is. It's probably going to get some awards and people are really liking the film. And I think for me, it's just an okay film. I feel like there's just a lot of political stuff that I really don't care about. I don't really care too much about electing a pope, but I think the performances made me care a little bit enough to kind of get through this movie. It's a little bit slow at times. It's really just about these people just voting several times. They do like 7-8 votes, and they have to have a certain amount of the population of these cardinals to vote somebody in. And basically throughout each vote, they basically have all these political things that come out, certain things that really hurt each candidate, in which later on, when they finally select the Pope, it's kind of someone out of thin air, and you don't really have a lot of time with that said character. There is one action scene in which something happens to the church, and they just kind of gloss over it really quick. I also didn't like the fact that we don't really get a sense of anything outside the church. We don't really get anybody's perspective of this election and who they want to win or kind of how their feelings are about it. We just kind of get a bunch of these cardinals really just having all this drama and political type stuff that is really going on, but nothing really else in the film. And I didn't like the ending at all. I felt like it's just a very dramatic ending for the sake of having people to talk about the ending, but I just thought it was a terrible ending. As far as a score, I would give it a 2.5 out of 5. I wouldn't watch it again, but I could say that if Ralph Fiennes actually got an award for this performance, I would wouldn't be against it either. Next up is a film called Juror II. This is directed by Clint Eastwood. I've seen many of his films. I'm not going to list off every single one that I've seen. The film stars Nicholas Hoult, Toni Collette, J.K. Simmons, Zoe Deutsch, and Chris Messina, and it's basically about a character played by Nicholas Hoult in which he is serving on a jury duty for a guy that has recently murdered his girlfriend. Now, this was a very relatable film because it takes place in a courtroom. I just recently did jury duty, so a lot of things that were really happening, like the defense and the plaintiffs, everything that they were really saying, I definitely related to. The jury deliberation, I did that as well. There's a lot of differences of opinions. I had to go through that. So I definitely related to the movie in that aspect. If you like courtroom dramas, if you like that sort of thing, you're really going to like this movie because most of the movie takes place in the courtroom, hearing about the facts, deliberating about a lot of things that really actually happened. There is a twist to this movie, and about 30 minutes in, they kind of reveal a certain point of that twist in which I was like, okay, so I get where this is going, but at the same time with that twist, towards the end of the film, I was like, okay, how are they going to wrap this up? Because just kind of how everything was really being laid out and just kind of how the case was really going. There was a certain point in which there's certain evidence that's presented that kind of interferes with the trial, and I was like, oh man, I wonder how this would have played out in real life if they would have changed something about the case. I felt as the film was going along, I really liked seeing Nicholas Hoult's performance. I thought he was really good, and I think this year has been a good year for him, even in Nosferatu. Even though I didn't really like that movie all that much, I think his performances are really good, and I think he's really having a return to shape of form, especially kind of going out of like the smaller movies that he was in, and now he's getting into these little bit bigger movies, I would say. I mean, this one's a little bit more under the radar, but I feel like his performance here is great. I would say from an ending perspective, I kind of was very unsure about it, but at the same time, I feel like that's kind of a good ending for it, just the way it kind of played out, just because of how everything really unfolded. I think if you really like courtroom dramas and you really are looking for something in which you're studying this case and really getting the facts and everything lined out, I think you could really enjoy this film. I just think certain things that were revealed on early on, I think they should have waited a little bit later on into the movie, but I'm not sure how they would have stretched the runtime. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I would give a score of this a 4 out of 5. And the last movie that I checked out was The Front Room. This is directed by Max Eggers and Sam Eggers, and this is both their directorial debuts. The film stars Brandy Norwood, Andrew Burnap, and Catherine Hunter. Now, I heard a lot of bad reviews for this movie. It was marketed as a horror thriller film, and it's about this woman who is pregnant and her mother-in-law moves in after her husband actually passes away. With this couple, she is basically a pain in the butt. She just drives them crazy. And I don't know why this is marketed a horror thriller film. There's nothing horror about this movie whatsoever. I wouldn't even say this is really a thriller film. It's mainly just differences of generations and their opinions and just kind of how they really see the world, how they view raising a child. I think the old school, they have a different view on how they want to raise a child versus, the younger generation, how they feel they want to raise a child. There is some weird little things that happen in this film, like obviously with old age. There's parts in here where the character Catherine Hunter, she poops in the bed, or she pees everywhere, or she feels like she really just can't really walk anywhere and needs that help. And I think there is some obviously messaging towards the fact of getting older and how you need help and such like that. She was a very annoying character, but I really think it comes from the fact and from her performance that it was pretty good. I mean, she really annoyed me. I was like, man, I just want to slap this woman. She just won't shut up. She's got all these opinions. I really hope when I'm older, I'm not like that, with all these opinions that she has. She's just really negative, and just you see kind of her character go really off the wall and just really annoying both the husband here and the wife. From a perspective and a story perspective, I don't really think it's all that great. I think the ending makes sense to a point, but it's kind of abrupt. And there really isn't like a ton of action in this film. There's definitely no scares. There's no horror in this. I don't know why they marketed this as a horror film. but I was kind of bored throughout this film. I didn't completely hate the film. I felt like I said, there was some messaging in the film, but it just really wasn't that great. I think it's a very mediocre film for an A24 film. I do know this is coming to Max, I believe, on January 17th. So if you want to check it out for free there, it will be available. But I can't give a score of this more than a 2 out of 5. It just was really boring. There really wasn't a whole lot going on. And I just felt at times like I was like, what was the point of this movie? Like, what are we trying to accomplish in this movie? I just felt like I didn't really get the story all that much, other than just like a few little things in the messaging. And I just felt like by the time it wrapped up, I was like, why did I watch that movie? It really wasn't that good. But it's not the worst of the year, but it still isn't good. So 2 out of 5 is what I give this film. So have you guys seen any of these films? Comment below what you thought about these films. If you haven't checked them out yet, are you going to check them out now that some of them are on streaming or VOD, or are you going to check them out at the theater? Leave any all comments down below, and thank you guys for watching.